Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about some rumors that we got yesterday, specifically about James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. We're going to go through what was said, what I think is going to happen, and what this means for both the Rockets as well as the Sixers. But really quickly, before we get started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing. I upload twice a day, every day. It's a great place for consistent NBA content. You can also leave a like rating on the video as well. It helps me out a ton. It lets me know that you're enjoying this specific piece of content, and it helps get the video out to more people on YouTube as well. If you're interested in hanging out with me outside of these videos, you can hang out at twitch.tv/spolo_TD. I stream a guaranteed 5 times per week, and by the time you're watching this, it's pretty likely that I'm live right now if you want to come hang out. And if you want to hang out with the rest of the community outside of these videos as well, you can go to the Discord server that's linked down in the description below as well. With all those things said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin by talking about kind of the news. I struggle to even call it the news that broke yesterday, but we can still talk about it in kind of that sense. I was streaming yesterday and got a notification from Shams in which he was basically saying the Philadelphia 76ers are interested and are pursuing a James Harden trade. And there's the obvious connection there with Daryl Morey now being in Philadelphia, Houston being in a bit of a limbo situation there, not really sure where they're going to go from here. Some people are calling for a possible rebuild. And if they were to rebuild, obviously a James Harden trade would certainly be on the table for them. And the mindset there for Houston, if that's the path they wanted to take, would just be, let's get as much as we can in return for James Harden and Russell Westbrook and Robert Covington, PJ Tucker, any, valuable trade pieces on this roster, and let's just completely reset everything. We've got a new coach. We've got presumably at some point a new general manager. We have a new owner from a couple of years ago. Let's just completely reset this thing in Houston. Let's get picks. Let's get young players. Let's get more tradable veterans in exchange for, the guys that are currently on the roster, and let's go forward from there. Now, I've talked about this a little bit in the past. I don't really think that there is a great option moving forward for Houston. I don't think that there's something on the table right now that allows them to become, a great team of the future or the present, just because of their draft pick situation moving forward, as well as just not having an incredibly talented roster at the moment, at least in terms of being a championship contending team. So what I've assumed that the Rockets are going to do are just run it back and keep James Harden, keep Russell Westbrook, keep Robert Covington, keep PJ Tucker, look at possible moves, including a move potentially with Philadelphia to bring in a more traditional big man. I've thought about, the possibility of an Al Horford trade going to Houston. But the more that you really sit down and you think about a James Harden trade, from Houston's perspective, the less sense it really begins to make. And apparently it's been reported that Houston at the moment is not considering a James Harden trade to Philadelphia or to anyone else. Because if you take Harden off this roster, obviously you don't know what the compensation would be in return, but in an immediate sense, the team would be worse. And given the lack of control that they have over their draft picks moving forward, there's no real incentive for the Rockets to be a bad team right now. I've said this in the past. If they had control over all their picks, pretty much everybody on the roster would be for sale right now. But that's simply not the case. And even if you're getting picks back in exchange for James Harden, you're going to be a really, really bad team once you start really moving all these pieces around. And that's a difficult situation to be in. Now, for the Sixers, I understand the connection here, and I think that's where most of the interest lies at the moment, because again, Houston doesn't seem all that interested in moving James Harden, but we can talk about the hypotheticals of what a Harden in Philadelphia, fit would look like. And I think a lot of people are assuming that this would mean that Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid would be involved in the trade. I don't necessarily think that that's the case. Obviously, the easiest path to this would be some kind of Embiid or Simmons swap with Harden and figure out the rest of it later. But as I've said multiple times over the last 2 weeks, I find it hard to believe that Philadelphia, even with Daryl Morey in the front office now, would move on from Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid in year one of the Doc Rivers experiment. I find that hard to believe right now. It's certainly an interesting sign that with Daryl Morey being there for just a few days, we're already getting James Harden rumors from Shams, not just from some random source. But I do think it's possible when you start to really kind of, fiddle around with the NBA trade machine. I do think it's possible to find a Harden trade package to Philly that does not involve Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid, and that's probably what Philly is looking to try and do here. Now, it would be an incredibly complicated deal. It would probably involve moving Josh Richardson and Tobias Harris and probably Al Horford in there as well, moving pretty much every significant asset on the roster for Philly outside of Simmons and Embiid. There would be multiple teams involved. There'd be picks going multiple directions to try and compensate Houston correctly without getting, the two most valuable assets on the table right now for Philly, which is Simmons and Embiid. But I do think that it's possible to make something like that work. I think Richardson has value. I think Tobias Harris to the correct team has value. You can kind of move some picks around and you can kind of figure it out there eventually between those two teams and probably a couple of others as well. Now, again, the simplest path would be Simmons for Harden, and you can figure out the stuff along the edges there. That specific trade has been reported as unlikely and something that Houston is not considering at the moment. It is still early, and teams can't even make trades right now in the NBA. We don't really know when that restriction is going to be lifted. Ever since the suspension of the league, teams have not been able to make moves, and that has not been changed yet to this point. Maybe December 1st, maybe earlier than that, is going to be when we see that window possibly open up. But I mean, the draft is in 10 days and the possible start of the season is in a month and a half. So at some point, they've got to be able to make these moves, and hopefully that happens at some point soon, because I'm certainly looking forward to seeing what trades do go down. But for this situation specifically, what I would say is that I'm not buying the rumors. I kind of buy that Philly would be interested in Harden as someone that is, one of the best perimeter playmakers in the entire league, provides them spacing if for some reason he is off the ball. The Harden-Embiid pick and roll combination would be a really, really difficult one to stop. You'd have to figure out, where Simmons falls in that equation. There would certainly be an interesting and intriguing fit there. But at the end of the day, I don't see this happening, and you can make the Morey connection if you want to, but this one isn't flying for me right now. This is not on my radar. I don't think that Harden's going to be moved. I don't think that it makes sense to, spread this rumor around as if it's fact at the moment, unless Houston has a change of heart. I believe the Philly part of this, but unless Houston a week from now or 2 weeks from now suddenly says, you know what, we're okay with a rebuild despite not having our own picks. Unless that happens, I don't see any way that this deal goes through. So it's interesting. I love a good NBA trade rumor, especially when it involves big names like James Harden. But for me right now, I don't see anything concrete materializing between Philly and Houston. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, including any of the 2-a-day that I've been putting out over the last week and a half or so, typically I upload between 11 and 12 Eastern time in the morning and between 6 and 7 Eastern time in the evening, which I know is a little bit of a different upload schedule than usual. But if you've missed any of those previous videos, you can check them out in the boxes on screen. You can just go look in the playlist. There's a ton of NBA offseason content coming out over this past week and a half, and now moving forward as well. So be on the lookout for that. Again, I appreciate all the love and support, and I will see you all next time.